The morning after should have been filled with warmth, with laughter echoing from relatives still lingering in the house, with me holding on to the glow of being newly married. Instead, I carried the heaviness of a secret I had no one to share with. Every glance I gave Ayan felt strained, every smile forced. He moved around effortlessly, greeting family members, playing the role of a husband as though nothing weighed on him. That perfect mask of his both fascinated and terrified me, how easily he could bury truths beneath his charm. That I noticed Saad that morning, standing off to the side, his eyes resting on me with a concern he didn't voice. He was Ayan's cousin, close like a brother, someone who had always been kind without stepping too close. But his silence had a shape to it, the kind of silence that carries knowledge it cannot share. Later, when I found a moment alone, he approached me carefully, like someone debating whether to pull a bandage off a wound. His words came hesitant, but they landed like blows. He told me there were things I didn't know about Aya, things that would hurt, but things I deserved to hear. At first, I wanted to run from the conversation. The last thing I wanted was another fracture in the illusion I was already struggling to hold together. But Saad's tone carried no malice, only a reluctant honesty. He told me that even while Ayan had been preparing to marry me, he hadn't let go of another woman. The relationship hadn't ended when it should have. It bled into our engagement, kept alive in secret meetings, hidden conversations, late-night calls that family never noticed. My chest constricted as the words sank in. Part of me clung to the possibility that Saad was mistaken, but deep inside, I knew he wasn't. His eyes didn't lie, his voice didn't waver. I asked if it was Sarah, my mind desperate to fit the pieces into one betrayal instead of two, but his silence told me otherwise. This wasn't Sarah, it was someone else. A woman I didn't know, someone outside the walls of my world, yet someone who had been close enough to occupy the place I thought was mine alone. That I felt the ground slipping beneath me. First Zara, now this shadowy figure I couldn't even name. The betrayal spread wider, growing roots into places I couldn't reach. I tried to steady my breathing, to keep myself from unraveling in front of Saad, but inside I was collapsing. He didn't say more, only muttered that he had kept quiet to protect the family, to avoid scandal. But watching me now, he could no longer carry it in silence. Then he left me with the weight of his confession, leaving me to drown in questions with no answers. That night, I searched. While Ayan stepped into the shower, I looked through his belongings with trembling hands, not sure if I wanted proof or reassurance. What I found was worse than I expected: another phone, tucked away in the drawer beneath neatly folded clothes. A phone I had never seen before. The messages were there, threads of conversations with a name saved only as an initial. Words of affection, late-night promises, talk of missed moments and secret meetings. Some messages were weeks old, others from just days before the wedding. The kind of intimacy that shouldn't exist outside the vows we were meant to share. My body shook as I put it back exactly as I found it, every nerve in me screaming. The walls around me seemed to close in, the room colder than it had been a moment before. When Ayan emerged, smiling, casual, wrapping his arms around me like nothing had shifted, I almost screamed. How could he look at me with such ease while carrying such deceit? His touch burned with questions I couldn't ask. His smile carved wounds I couldn't reveal. I tried subtle confrontations. I asked about loyalty, about honesty, speaking in hypotheticals, hoping he would flinch, hoping he would break the act. But he didn't. His answers were smooth, measured, almost rehearsed. His denial of any wrongdoing was wrapped in laughter, as though my questions were naive. He kissed my forehead and told me to stop worrying, that love was enough. And yet, the more he spoke, the less I believed. Every moment with him now carried a dual edge. His gestures of affection no longer comforted me, they mocked me. The promises he had made at the altar, so grand and public, now felt hollow. My heart replayed Saad's confession, the secret phone, the messages from a woman I couldn't even picture. What was I to Ayan, a partner, or simply a mask he wore to please his family while his heart wandered elsewhere? I lay awake again that night, my body stiff beside his, unable to surrender to rest. I thought of how marriage was meant to be built on trust, on truth, and how mine was already drowning in lies. The past with Sarah was a wound, but this ongoing deception was a disease spreading into the very core of what we were supposed to be. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the distance between us wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Ayan was hiding behind walls he had built long before me, and I was just beginning to see how high they really were. By the time dawn broke, my mind was filled with a chilling certainty. Love wasn't the foundation of this marriage. Secrets were. And I knew, with a sinking heart, that this was only the beginning of what I was about to uncover. This is section 2. Almost equals 770 words. Shall I continue with section 3, 760 words, to complete the story arc with the final shocking secret?
The days that followed carried an emptiness I could not disguise. Every interaction with Ayan became a performance. Every word I spoke to him weighed down by truths I had no desire to hear repeated. He carried himself as though nothing had been exposed, as though my silence was a form of acceptance. But silence does not mean forgiveness, it is a prison, and I was already suffocating inside it. The people around us continued to smile, congratulating us on our union, admiring what they thought was a perfect beginning. If only they knew that behind the polished surface lay a crumbling foundation, held together only by my refusal to collapse in front of them. I started to question myself as much as I questioned him. Was I weak for staying, or strong for enduring? Each time I looked at Ayan, I remembered Zara's tears, his confession, Saad's reluctant honesty. Each memory built a wall between us, brick by brick, until I could hardly reach him anymore. And yet, despite the devastation, I could not make a clean decision. Marriage is not just two people, it is families, expectations, and the fear of judgment. Walking away meant more than leaving him, it meant inviting whispers, disgrace, and a future I wasn't prepared to face alone. But what gnawed at me most was not just the betrayal itself, it was the casual way he carried it. He didn't beg me to stay, he didn't drown in guilt. His apology, when it came, was shallow, an acknowledgement without depth, like a man who knew he had already won because my silence ensured his comfort. That realization was more painful than the infidelity itself. To know that he had calculated my tolerance, trusted that I would stay quiet for the sake of appearances, it broke me in ways betrayal alone could not. I began to notice more lies, subtle ones, woven into daily life. Excuses about late returns, sudden meetings that stretched into the night, glances at his phone that lingered longer than necessary. He thought I wasn't watching, but I saw everything now. Once your eyes are open to deceit, you can never return to blindness. And so I watched, collecting fragments of his falsehoods, building a truth he would never speak aloud. Zara disappeared from my life without words. She stopped visiting, stopped calling, retreating into a silence that confirmed her guilt. But her absence was no comfort. Every memory of her lingered in my home, in photographs, in objects she had helped me choose. She had been stitched into the fabric of my life so deeply that pulling her out left holes everywhere. I realized then that betrayal does not simply remove a person, it reshapes everything they touch. I could no longer trust my own judgment of people, could no longer look at friendships without suspicion. The cruelest part was that I still loved him. Or at least, I loved the version of him I thought I had married. That love clung to me like a shadow, refusing to let go, even as truth tore it apart. I wanted to hate him fully, to free myself from the weight of his presence. But love is not a switch. It lingers even where it is unwelcome, and that was my curse. To feel love for the very man who had destroyed me, nights became the hardest. The bed that was supposed to hold intimacy now held distance. I lay awake while he slept, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how he could rest so easily while my chest carried storms. I began to write in secret, pouring my pain into words I could not speak. Pages filled with questions, accusations, broken thoughts. I wrote because it was the only way to keep from shattering completely. As weeks passed, I realized the choice before me wasn't about him at all, it was about me. I could stay, pretending, living beneath the weight of lies, allowing my identity to dissolve into silence. Or I could choose myself, even if it meant walking into uncertainty, even if it meant facing the world alone. The betrayal had already destroyed the marriage. The only question was whether I would allow it to destroy me. 2.1 evening, as the house grew quiet, I stood in front of the mirror still wearing the jewelry from the wedding. I studied my reflection, the woman who looked back at me almost unrecognizable. She was no longer the bride filled with hope, no longer the friend who trusted blindly, no longer the woman who believed love was enough. She was something harder now, something sharper. Betrayal had carved her into someone new. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I had already lost him, but I had not yet lost myself. That clarity was my turning point. I didn't need to announce it, didn't need to scream it out loud. My decision settled quietly inside me like a seed waiting to grow. I would not let his lies define my life. I would not carry Zara's betrayal as my identity. I would step away, not because I wanted freedom, but because I deserved it. He could keep his secrets, his masks, his comfort built on deception. I would keep my dignity, and so, without fanfare, I began to plan my departure. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with resolve. Because sometimes the loudest act of strength is not in fighting for something broken, but in walking away from it. This is section 4, almost equals 770 words, carrying the story into Maya's emotional resolution and decision. Do you want me to now craft the final YouTube-style title and description for this full faceless video series? On the night that was supposed to be the beginning of my forever, I carried with me the glow of every moment from the wedding. The laughter, the applause, the promises whispered beneath the canopy, everything felt like a carefully crafted dream finally unfolding into reality. I had looked at Ayan with complete certainty, convinced that he was the man destined to stand beside me, to love me without question, to hold me in all my fragile moments. The house was full of blessings, people still lingering in corners, joy laced into every conversation, and yet, deep within me, there was an unsettling tug, a quiet murmur that something wasn't right. I noticed it first when Zara avoided my eyes. She had been my closest friend, the one who fixed my dress, the one who stood closest when I walked into the hall, but whenever our gazes met, she looked away too quickly, like someone hiding a story she had no courage to tell. At first, I brushed it aside, convincing myself it was exhaustion or sentiment overwhelming her, but when I replayed the way she hugged Ayan during the reception, holding on a little too long, my heart began to whisper doubts. Love makes you dismiss your own instincts, and I was eager to silence mine that night. As the festivities died down and silence claimed the walls, I caught a sound I wasn't supposed to hear. Low voices, almost urgent, seeping through the door that should have been closed to secrets. At first, I thought it was the staff finishing up their duties, but then I caught Ayan's voice, lowered but sharp, filled with tension. The second voice made my stomach twist. It was Zara. My body froze, my breath caught halfway, and I leaned closer, straining to hear. They weren't laughing or reminiscing, they were talking like people bound by something heavy, something forbidden. Zara's tone carried guilt, Ayan's tone carried restraint, and between them was a silence heavy with unspoken history. My world tilted when I caught fragments of words, her apologizing for bringing emotions into this night, him telling her it was in the past, that nothing should spill over, that Maya didn't need to know. My name, slipping from his mouth like a reminder of the life he was now obligated to honor. In that moment, the veil of innocence lifted, and every tender moment I had believed in began to feel like a rehearsed performance. Zara had been more than a friend to him, more than someone standing on the periphery of our love story. She had been inside it. The realization burned through me. My closest friend, the one who knew all my fears and my happiness, had once shared the very intimacy I thought was mine alone. The betrayal wasn't happening now, at least from what I gathered, but the fact that it had happened at all, and that neither of them had confessed, crushed me. I felt deceived not just by Ayan, but by Zara, who had sat across from me countless times, sipping tea and listening to me speak about him, never once letting her eyes reveal the truth. I walked back into the room like a ghost, my body moving while my mind screamed. The wedding dress felt heavier on my skin, like chains rather than silk. Every compliment, every cheer from the day replayed in my head like mocking echoes. Was I just the woman who arrived after Zara, chosen because she was convenient, because she fit the picture of respectability, because families approved? The thought clawed at me, refusing to loosen its grip. I wanted to confront them, to burst into that room and demand explanations, but the weight of shame pinned me down. I feared that once I spoke it out loud, it would become undeniable, irreversible. Maybe if I stayed silent, it could dissolve into the air, vanish like a dream, leaving me with the life I had always hoped for. But silence has its own poison, and as I lay down beside Ayan later, pretending to sleep while he pretended nothing had happened, the distance between us stretched wider than the sea. Every little detail of his touch, his smile, his words replayed in my head with a new filter, a question mark hovering over them all. Did he ever truly choose me? Or was I always standing in the shadow of Zara, filling a role she could not? The more I thought, the less I could trust anything. Even his declaration of love at the altar began to sound rehearsed, practiced lines in a story I hadn't been given the full script for. The night stretched endlessly, the silence louder than any music we had danced to hours earlier. My chest ached with a hollow kind of grief, one that comes not from loss but from realization. It was the first night of my marriage, and already, the foundation had cracks deep enough to swallow everything. I stared at the ceiling, my eyes burning, wondering what kind of future could be built when the past was already poisoning the present, and as Ayan drifted into sleep beside me, I stayed wide awake, carrying the first secret of my marriage like an uninvited guest between us. The question that kept looping in my head was not just whether Zara had once been his choice, but whether she still was. I had walked into this marriage believing I was beginning a love story, but by the end of that night, I was left asking myself if I was simply continuing someone else's unfinished chapter. This is section 1, almost equals 770 words. Do you want me to continue with section 2, 760 words, in the same faceless narration style? By the third night, the silence inside me had hardened into something sharp. I could no longer pretend the weight on my chest was temporary, no longer convince myself that time would smooth over what had been shattered. Every secret I had uncovered lingered like smoke in the air, suffocating me. Zara's betrayal had burned one part of me, Saad's confession scorched another, and yet I knew there was still something unresolved, something that hadn't yet surfaced but was waiting to strike. I could feel it in Ayan's eyes whenever I caught him watching me, eyes that looked at me with affection but carried shadows I couldn't unsee. I began piecing together fragments, replaying conversations, recalling every subtle glance, every awkward pause between Ayan and Zara during the months of wedding planning. Memories returned to me in pieces, moments I had once brushed aside but now viewed through a darker lens. The time Zara left abruptly during a dinner, claiming a headache, while Ayan stepped out minutes later to take a call. The strange tension whenever I spoke of future plans, as if Zara's silence was weighted with more than just friendly concern. What I once thought was loyalty began to reveal itself as guilt hiding beneath the surface. The truth revealed itself not through words but through patterns. Zara's absence from gatherings that mattered, her avoidance of me when Ayan was nearby, the way she always found reasons not to meet my gaze when conversations turned personal. The final piece came when I overheard Saad speaking to her in hushed tones, his voice urgent, hers breaking. She admitted that it hadn't been just the past, she and Ayan had crossed the line again, even as the wedding was being planned. The air left my lungs. I had been fighting shadows in my mind, but now the monster stood fully formed. My best friend had not just been a chapter in Ayan's past, she had been part of my present, entwined in the very days that were supposed to be my happiest. The betrayal hit harder than the first two secrets combined. It wasn't just a hidden history or an unknown woman outside my circle. It was Sarah, someone I trusted enough to let into every corner of my life. She had helped me pick colors for my wedding. She had listened as I practiced signing my new name. She had walked beside me down the aisle knowing she was already carrying the weight of her own guilt. That kind of deception is not an accident, it's a choice made over and over. And Ayan had allowed it, had chosen to live in the comfort of her familiarity even as he promised himself to me. When I confronted Ayan, I didn't shout. My voice was steady, though my heart threatened to collapse with every word. I asked him plainly if Sarah had ever stopped being part of his life. For a moment, his mask cracked. His silence was longer than any explanation could have been, and when he finally spoke, his confession wasn't laced with remorse, it was laced with resignation. He admitted that Sarah had always been the one he leaned on, the one he never fully let go of. He married me because it made sense, because families approved, because I was the safer choice. Zara was his chaos, his temptation, but I was the one who gave him acceptance in society's eyes. The truth pierced deeper than any blade. To realize that love had not been the foundation of my marriage but convenience, calculation, and cowardice, it broke something permanent inside me. Zara wept when I confronted her later, her apologies tumbling out like broken glass. But apologies cannot stitch back the fabric of trust once it's torn. She said she had tried to end it, that she thought Ayan would eventually choose me fully, but love isn't a shadow you can erase with willpower. She knew what she was doing every time she stood beside me, and that knowledge poisoned every memory of her friendship. As I stood there between them, my husband and my best friend, the weight of their choices settled into me. They had turned my wedding into a stage, performing love and loyalty in front of everyone while privately weaving betrayal behind the curtain. I wasn't just deceived, I was used as a symbol, a piece to complete a picture they couldn't draw honestly. That night, I lay awake once more, staring at the ceiling, the truth pressing down like a storm. 3 secrets, each one heavier than the last. The first told me I was never his first choice. The second revealed he hadn't stopped betraying me, even during our engagement. And the third shattered everything, showing me that my own friend had been complicit in the lies that built my marriage. What was left of the vows, the promises, the words spoken under the canopy? Nothing but ashes. I didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried, leaving only clarity. I realized that what I had lost wasn't a husband, because perhaps I never truly had one to begin with. What I lost was the illusion of love I had carried so faithfully. I had walked into my wedding believing I was beginning a life rooted in trust, but I walked out of those first nights with a truth far more haunting. Love cannot exist where secrets thrive. And once the truth is uncovered, it cannot be buried again. This is section 3, almost equals 770 words, completing the arc with the final devastating truth. You want me to now craft the title plus description for the faceless video upload, optimized for engagement.